Hello and welcome to the first Developing Experts live lesson. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. As part of Science Week this year, the theme is connections, and what better way to look at connections than to look at real-world careers and the work that you do in the classroom. I'm Katie Barry and I'm going to be taking you through this live lesson, and I'm joined by please.
Okay, I'm a zoologist, but I specialise in herpetology, and herpetology is a study of creeping, crawling things, in other words, reptiles and amphibians. So I'm interested in frogs, toads, newts, snakes, lizards, all those creatures.
Brilliant, thank you. So thank you to all the schools that are joining us from across the country. And teachers, if you are accessing the live lesson through the DE platform, you can type your answers and any questions that you have for Mike during the session into the comments box that is now shown on the screen. And it would be lovely to see which schools are joining us, so please do say hello. There will be activities for you to complete throughout the live lesson today, so please fill these in on the handout that has been provided by your teacher. And it's great that I can see Roby Park Primary School are joining us this morning.
Brilliant.
So today we are talking about amphibians. So Mike, what is an amphibian?
Well, an amphibian is a type of vertebrate, because they've got a backbone like we do, but they are cold-blooded vertebrates. They don't make any body heat. And the word amphibian derives from two words, amphi and bios, dual lives, two lives. Okay. A, because they live on land but often go into water, but also they usually start off life as an aquatic tadpole or larva, which then develops with age, and then its gills turn to lungs, so they can then come out of the water and breathe on land. So it starts off in the water, ends up on land, but it still returns to the water in order to breed.
Fantastic. And we've had a question from Church Drive Primary School.
Why are amphibians your favourite group of animals? What is your favourite amphibian animal?
Well, I think my favourite amphibian has to be the world's biggest amphibian, the Chinese giant salamander.
Oh, wow.
It gets to well over 1.5 meters long, is known to live for over 100 years. It's got a head the size of a huge dinner plate, and it's entirely aquatic. And it breathes through its skin. It's got long, big folds of skin on its body, which act like gills, and it absorbs oxygen from the water. But the fact it eats crayfish, it eats frogs, it eats all sorts of things. But it's huge, absolutely huge.
It's about as tall as me.
Yeah, it is. It is. Just that, yeah.
So we've got a challenge question for all of you. As a class, can you guess how many different species of amphibian there are in the world? Your teacher can type your guess into the chat box and we can reveal how many amphibian species there are at the end of today's session. So now it's time for activity 1. On your handout, tick the animals that you think are amphibians. You've got 2 minutes to do this. So how did you get on? I wonder if the pupils at Edith Cavell Primary School were able to tick the amphibians. So throughout this lesson, we are going to look at different types of amphibian and their different features and where they live. And first, we've got a very special guest.
We do. We've got a poison dart frog from South America. And in many ways, it's a typical frog. Before you handle any amphibian, you should always wet your hands, in this case in cold water, because, as I said, we are warm-blooded, they are cold-blooded, and when you pick them up, it could be a bit of a shock. They've got these hot hands holding them. So here's a little poison dart frog.
Oh, brilliant.
This one is, for obvious reasons, called a bumblebee poison dart frog, and it's coloured like a bumblebee because it's warning you, do not try and eat me, I taste awful. But more than that, it's actually got a poisonous secretion in its skin, hence the name poison dart frog. And if that skin gets into your blood system, it could easily kill you. Now, I'm quite safe, A, because it's got to get into your blood system, but B, in captivity, and this has been captive bred, they become non-toxic. And we believe that it's from the diet that they eat in the wild, such as ants. That's where the poison is made from in the skin.
So actually we've had a question from one of our schools, which is how poisonous is the poison dart frog in the wild?
In the wild, it's one of the most toxic vertebrates on Earth.
So he's on the move now,
yeah.
And the so those long legs are the two long legs are at the back, and that's what he uses to jump.
Yep.
And the short legs are at the front, and I can see his webbed feet as well.
We're at the back.
So it's time for activity 2. Use some of the information that Mike has showed us and the word bank to help you label the frog and its features. Take 3 minutes to do this. Well, thank you so much to Little Digmore Primary School for joining us today. I wonder how you got on labelling the frog. So you will see that we have a different creature on our table now. What's this, Mike?
This is a Suriname toad. It's called a Suriname toad because it comes from Suriname, which is a country in South America. As you'll see, it's in water because this particular species is entirely aquatic. It doesn't come onto land. It spends all of its life in water, but it does still breathe air. It has lungs. So if I just take him out with my hand, it's one of the weirdest looking animals you can imagine.
It sort of looks a bit like a dead leaf.
It's designed to do that because it lives on the bottom of murky rivers which are covered in leaves. And it sits there in the gloom and the murk waiting for food to come by. If you look at the nose end, it does have two tiny nostrils and it's on a very pointed end of its nose, so it can sit in the water completely hidden with just that little tip of his nose sticking out, breathing the air. And it's got its hands here that it uses for feeding and its huge webbed feet at the back that it uses for swimming. It's a very strong swimmer.
And we've had a question actually on the chat. How does the Suriname toad hunt?
Well, what it does, I'll put him down. These little front legs are very important, and the little stars on the end of the toes are very sensitive. So effectively what it does, it sits in the murky water. You can hardly see it, it's so muddy, and it sits there with its hands like this. And any fish or insect that comes swimming by, and if it touches one of its fingers, it goes om, 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 om. And it just engulfs a lot of water with the animal, and that's how it feeds.
Brilliant.
Hi Mike, what's the difference between a frog and a toad?
Well, what a great question. Well, I've got a frog and a toad here with me, so I'll show you the difference. To be quite honest, there's not a lot of difference between a frog and a toad. Here's a toad. Now, we tend to call amphibians like this with a dry, warty skin and short back legs and a rounded snout, a toad. A frog, on the other hand, is very similar, but it has a more pointed snout. It's got much longer hind legs for leaping with because frogs jump and toads hop. And it's got a very wet, slippery skin, which makes it very hard to hold.
So thank you, Mike, for talking about the differences between a frog and a toad. So now it's time for activity 3. There are 2 images on your handout, which is a frog and which is a toad. Discuss the similarities and differences with a partner. Take 2 minutes. get on. I wonder if the pupils at Attleborough Primary School spotted the frog and the toad correctly. So we're now moving on to our next amphibian, and what have we got in this tank, Mike?
Well, the second group of amphibians, after the frogs and toads, are the newts and salamanders. So what we have here is a fire salamander.
Oh, wow.
I'll just wet my hands again, take him out, and here he is. This is a European fire salamander.
And this isn't a lizard?
It's not a lizard. It's got the shape of a lizard. It's got a long body, a long tail and 4 legs, but it's an amphibian. Lizards are reptiles, and as such they have scales all over the body to protect them from drying out, because lizards and reptiles in general live almost exclusively on the land, and they need the protection of the scales to stop the bodies drying out. If you put this salamander in the desert, it would die within minutes because it's so hot and dry. Lizards would love it. They'd sit in the sun and they'd run around, and that's the biggest difference. Now you can see this one is black and yellow, and again it's warning me, do not try and eat me, it's saying, because I taste horrible. And I can vouch for that because I once put my fingers in my mouth when I ate a sandwich after holding a salamander, and it does really taste horrible. And so the thing I want to say here now is whenever you handle any animal, especially these animals, wash your hands. It's very, very important. And if you've taken a dog for a walk through the forest in France and it came across one of these and started to sniff and lick it, it would foam at the mouth and start to bark, and it wouldn't die, but it would be in pain for a while because they have this secretion in the skin, which is poison.
And secretion is like just a liquid?
Yes, it's like a mucus, it's like a sweat, whatever comes out from pores of its skin, and it's designed to taste awful.
So can you talk a bit, Mike, because you've got some baby salamanders here.
Yes.
Could we have a look at those, please?
Now, one of the reasons I say why we call these amphibians means dual life. What happens in the spring is that the female salamander spends all of its life on the land, but once a year they go down to the stream and they drop live babies in the stream. The eggs are developed inside the body and they go down and drop them. And this is a baby fire salamander. It's barely 2.5–3 centimeters long, and you can see it's got gills because it's living in water. It needs to breathe like a fish, but it's got the same shape: the head, the long body, 4 legs, and a tail. Now it spends about 2 or 3 months in the water feeding on mayfly larvae, bloodworms, all sorts of things, and it grows. And as it's growing, it's changing and it's losing its gills. And after a while, it's breathing with its lungs, and it develops into a little tiny, I'll hold this up in its box because it's a bit delicate, a little tiny fire salamander. And you can see already it's got no gills, it's breathing air, but it's got the same markings. It's black with yellow spots already within a week of coming out onto the land. So it will then take about 5 years to grow to adult size, and they can live for 20 or 30 years as an adult.
Moving on to our next animal. Mike, what is this?
This is another salamander, and it's a very special salamander. It's called the axolotl. And these come from Mexico. Just outside Mexico City, there's a big lake called Lake Xochimilco. But the strange thing is, it's entirely aquatic. It never comes out of the water. And if you look very closely at the head end, it's got 3 pairs of feathery gills. And it's breathing just like a fish. Fish use gills, the axolotl uses gills. And if you remember the baby fire salamander, that had 3 pairs of gills that it loses. Well, the axolotl is like a baby salamander that grows and grows and grows, but never loses its gills. And it breeds like this in this stage as a giant tadpole. So there's no adult that comes out onto land. The axolotl is entirely an aquatic giant tadpole.
And is this axolotl fully grown?
No, it's about half grown. They get to almost 30 centimeters long.
It's about as long as a ruler.
Yeah, yeah. And as I say, they live a long, long time. And again, like the tadpoles, if it got a leg bitten off by another axolotl, it would grow it again. In fact, it can lose all 4 legs and 5 of its 6 gills and still survive and regrow the whole lot eventually and look absolutely perfect again.
So we posed a question at the start of the session. How many species of amphibian are there in the world? And Mike, can you please reveal the answer?
Well, right now, at this moment in time, there are 8,587 species of amphibians that we know of in the world. However, come back tomorrow because that number may change, because especially with frogs and toads, they're discovering and describing new species every week, especially from places like Papua New Guinea and Indonesia that live high up in the trees that we've never seen them before. So it does change, but at the moment, 8,587 species.
And well done to the school that got closest to that answer. Check your post for a prize. So we've come to the end of the session today, but we haven't provided lots of follow-up activities for you to complete. Perhaps you could design a habitat for one of your amphibians by painting a picture, creating a collage, or making the habitat within a shoebox. And as always, please share photos with us on social media because we love to see your work. Thank you for joining us today. We've had over 400 schools log in to this live session, including Lee North Street Primary School. So thank you for taking part, your questions and your comments. But most of all, thank you to you, Mike, and to your special guests.
Pleasure.
And we hope you have a wonderful science week. Goodbye.
Bye.